Hello everybody, my name is Ryan Van Vels, the Weller Truck Parts Electronics Department. This is Aaron Pickle, and what we have today is the Eaton Endurant MTM or the PACCAR TX12 MTM, and we have a repair kit that we've developed for the output shaft speed sensor right here, the connector. What happens is these transmissions have a tendency to roll over and it breaks this connector off, which requires the MTM to be replaced. And that's a lot of work just to replace a broke connector. So Aaron here's developed a repair process to replace this connector and get it back to a serviceable condition. And today in this video we're going to show how to make that repair on this MTM. So the first thing we need to do is familiarize ourselves with the transmission. This is the MTM. Traditionally the TCM would sit right here. You're going to have to remove that for this. We already have ours removed. And then you're going to have to remove the bolts that hold this lid onto the base of the MTM. So Aaron, we already started. Can you pull these bolts out here for us? And what size bit is that you got, Aaron?
This is a T45 Torx bit.
Okay, and now the tools that we need for this project, they're all listed on the instructions, correct?
Yes.
So Aaron, earlier you talked about the tools required to do this job and how we lay it out in the instructions. We have the tools laid out. Now, why don't we go over that real quick?
Tools you'll need for this job: T45 Torx. Not shown here will be 7mm, 10mm, and 13mm to take the TCM off. And you want a torque wrench for putting everything back together, screwdriver or some kind of pick so you can pry the retainer tool or the retainer clip off. You want something blunt to get underneath the tape line, crimping pliers for the butt splices, wire strippers, wire cutters, friction tape. If you want to double check everything before you put the lid back on and put the trans back in, you can pin it out with a voltmeter. And then you'll want a heat source to melt the shrink tube, preferably a heat gun.
Cool. All right, well, let's pull the lid off here and we'll see the insides of our MTM. Should just lift straight off. There is a seal here that might be a little stuck, but it's not a big deal. That looseness there is by design, so don't be concerned if that connector is wiggling around there. So the point of concern here is right in here. You can see this connector body, this connector's broke, and this is our wire harness right here, and this is what we're going to splice into. So the first step of this process is we need to grab some cutters and we need to cut this wire harness as close to the body here as we can so we have enough wire there. So Aaron, you want to cut that wire for us?
Yep. You're going to want to cut it right at the connector to leave yourself plenty of room to work with the wires. There's not any other wires super close. Just be careful you're not cutting any of these main harness wires. After we cut the excess tape off, you want to make sure none of these wires got cut. Up here is not a problem as much as down here because this is not going to get cut off. Just make sure that you didn't slice anything. Open wire insulation could lead you to problems down the road if anything starts getting corroded, or could potentially short out to another one if it touches something. So you want to make sure that nothing got cut. These look good. So the next thing we're going to do is grab our pigtail. This is the replacement pigtail. You got extra wire on there just in case. If you splice them as is, there's plenty of room in there. To remove this retainer, if it's still there, simply put the screwdriver underneath it, pry it up, and then the connector will just slide right out of here. Next thing you want to do is verify that your wire colors are the same before you move forward. This kit is designed for a PS393, but there is also a PS496 version that has the wire colors flipped around, but I've seen exceptions. So you'll always want to verify that whatever wire came out of cavity number 2 will go in splice with cavity number 2, regardless of the wire color. And that will work for both PS393 and 496 applications, as long as you follow the wire colors that are in the cavity locations. 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3. The next step is stripping all 4 of these wires, and then we'll be installing these barrel butt splices. You're going to want to strip about 1/4 inch off, making sure you're in the right size strip hole so you don't strip wires out with it. One good idea when you're stripping wires is to keep your stripped ends and make sure there's no wires hanging around in there. This wire is 20 gauge. In this case, you can use the 18 or the 20. Then you want to do the same on your internal harness, making sure that you don't lose the strip piece in the transmission. In addition to the barrel butt splices, you'll get 2 pieces of heat shrink. So I have my shrink tube over the wires, so I have enough room for the butt splices. You can slide them on here too if you leave the wires longer, either way. Next step is to crimp your barrel splices onto either your internal harness or the pigtail, up to you. Whatever style crimpers you're using, you'll just want to make sure that you can't pull this barrel splice off as hard as you can and it won't come off. Also want to make sure that you're not crimped onto the insulation, that you're crimped onto the wire. These splices won't go over the insulation, so you're safe. As long as you left yourself enough strip length. You want to double check that you have your shrink tube on there. I like to hold on to the terminal with the pliers and make sure you're going cavity number 2, which was black, to the black wire. Give it a good squeeze, give it a good pull test. Try not to pull directly on the connector too hard. You should be able to pull on these pretty hard, nothing will come off, but just try to pull on the wires. That is definitely too tight. And move on to the white wire in cavity number 3. White wire internal harness. Give it a good squeeze, give it a good pull, make sure nothing's going to come out, and those are crimped. The next thing you want to do is make sure that these shrink tubes are centered directly over the barrel splices, and then you're going to want to shrink them with your heat gun. If you don't have a heat gun like this, you can use a lighter, you can use a mini torch. Just be careful that you keep it moving. Don't ever leave it on directly on the wires for very long. The shrink tube doesn't need a whole lot of heat, and that's it. I like to hold them apart so they don't stick together until they dry. They get a little tacky when they're hot, and that's it. Got the white wire to the white wire in this case, the black wire goes to the black wire in this case. You should be good to go. The next step here is to rewrap with your friction tape. If you don't have friction tape, you can get away with electrical tape because there's no oil inside of this.
If the customer did take the lid off, Aaron, and we saw some oil in here, I wouldn't proceed with this repair because that's typically indicative of the seals in the bottom end have failed. And it's sucking oil into the air cylinders and it's blowing oil out of these exhaust ports here, and this MTM will ultimately fail. So if you're this far along in the repair and you pop the lid and you see oil, that would be an issue, another issue completely, and you should probably call Weller at that point for a replacement part.
Next step is going to be, you're going to want to tuck the wire down in. Go straight down in with the connector, and then push it through the housing with the yellow lock tab facing up. Again, I'm going to grab your retainer, line it up with the tabs, slide it right down in there. The retainer, one is supplied with the kit.
All right, Aaron, so we got that connector on there, and you got the lock tab in. It looks to me like the job is complete. Is there anything else that we have to do as far as our wire routing here, to where we make sure that this doesn't get pinched at all, or is there a safe place for the harness?
I like to route the wires going straight down. There's not a whole lot of other spaces for it, but if you leave it up like this, you got a potential of it getting in the way. So you just push them straight down in there, they'll stay out of your way and you won't have to worry about pinching anything.
All right, so we're ready for our lid. I'm guessing at this point we want to make sure that the O-ring here, the seal did not become compromised during the removal. This one looks good to me. And this thing just sets right down on there. Then we reinstall our bolts. And the torque spec on this is 92 inch-pounds, if I recall. And those torque specs are in the manual, the instruction guide here. And once that's torqued down, the repair is complete.
Yep.
Put our TCM back on and reinstall the transmission in the truck. I guess it's worth saying that the transmission probably needs to be on the ground for this. You're not going to do this repair in the truck yet. So very tight quarters. I don't even know if you can get the lid off in the truck. So definitely we want the transmission on the ground to do this repair. Well, I think that does it for our install kit. These kits are available at our Weller stores all around the country. So if you have an MTM with a broke air output shaft speed sensor, don't take it off and replace it right away. Look for us to have that repair kit for you. So from our electronics and mechatronics facility here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, appreciate your time. Thank you.